Symbrock. In the age of user-generated content like this very dumb video, prosumer practices, where individuals both consume and produce content, has taken greater influence, including the discourse around fictional characters who have slimy and phallic-looking friends protruding from their bodies. Eddie Brock and Venom, a relationship that's often now being interpreted as being queer-coded, which is when characters appear queer without their sexualities being part of the story. Like when Venom turns on his own species because of his time with Eddie, his suggestion to snog Brock in order to transfer itself, and their general domestic-like bickering. Therefore, deliberate or not, although from what I've heard there's precedent set in the comics, there's a series of patterns that people love, to the extent that on AO3 and Tumblr they were the most popular ship in 2018. Sony went as far as advertising the home release of the films with romantic trailers. So as a prosumer's academic would argue, this has led, among many other things, to a greater willingness to question the hegemony of the idea of production. We are no longer accepting a productivist bias. Instead, scholars have recognized that the economies of the developed world have come to be more dominant by consumption. So let's penetrate this digital culture. I'm going to sample 3 of the most popular fanfic stories from 18th of October 2021. Wow, that's how far back I started working on this video. By the way, no hate or judgment. I'm literally doing this entirely out of curiosity and this is completely out of curiosity. In the story Vessel, Eddie tries to sleep but can't because across his apartment, people are doing it. Furthermore, Anne left him 6 months ago, so he feels deeply lonely. As I quote, "Not that he was counting. It would be really sad to count, as if his whole life were defined by Anne's presence or absence. Eddie could download Tinder anytime he wanted. He had options. He was choosing not to exercise those options." As a result, Eddie and Venom get into a conversation about how they spread their genetic material, if you know what I'm saying. So Venom flashes a series of super abstract and graphic images across Eddie's mind. Oh man, it's so hard to make that voice and not want to burp. Don't be shy, Eddie. We're friends. Reproduction is perfectly normal. Eddie is kind of prudish. He tries to say it's a private thing, but he gets seduced. They had reached an accord now. Eddie's body, while not entirely his own, was stable. As a result, Eddie's little Eddie gets touched, and a series of very, very graphic descriptions about the human body experiencing something that can only compare with getting your hands stuck in a Pringles can happens. Anyways, they're both exhausted afterwards. "Hurt me," repeated Eddie, eyes closed. There was sweat in them. He felt fevered. His right hand was cramping, and he was close. So close, he wanted what the woman on the other side of the wall had gotten. Venom knew it. Venom would have felt the bone-deep response from Eddie when he heard. Consequently, he gets slapped, and they both find deep emotional satisfaction, while big questions of what just happens. But a sense of peace is felt nonetheless. "Can we do that whenever we want?" Venom inquired, as Eddie staggered to the sink and drank from the tap in enormous gulps that spilled down his chest. "Whenever we want," Eddie said. And finally, he could sleep. The main theme of these stories, outside of being pretty pornographic, is loneliness. The conflict is derived from Eddie failing to pursue conventional practices of relationships, and Venom is presented as a form of substitute gratification for the emotional impotence Eddie feels. As a result, Venom itself exists in a very strange specific space between being both a separate entity from Eddie, someone who loves him, but also, since he's a part of him, he also represents self-love. He rejects his dalliances in order to be with himself, and it's in that self-acceptance, in embracing his loneliness with no self-judgment or shame, that Eddie finally feels whole. He finds happiness. This is especially highlighted by the next story. In Kiss the Skin That Crawls From You, it begins 4 months later after the film. Eddie's had his job back for 10 weeks, and he falls back easily into his old patterns. Sleep in, work until he's run out of leads for the day, get cheap takeout, and then fall asleep. Now that he's got Venom with him, the loneliness of the routine doesn't bother Eddie anymore. He'll never be lonely again. Eddie then goes on a date with a girl, but she leaves early, and Eddie doesn't put any effort in stopping her. Venom says, "You should be with Anne. We like Anne." Eddie isn't happy, so he drops the subject. Eddie is insecure about being a recluse. Why did I write Eddie that many times in such close proximity? So Venom speaks out and gets him together with another guy who just sort of agrees to do it. As they go back to his apartment to play board games with their bodies, there's an inner commentary to show how Eddie and Venom have stronger opinions and feelings for each other. The dude, Mark, is concerned, and I guess the spark is lost. I think maybe I should go. It's not not you. My mind just on the other things right now. As a result, Venom takes Eddie to show him how it's really done. Tendrils come out and you probably get the idea. The satisfaction leaves Eddie exhausted on the bed. "No more days," he said firmly, and Eddie's mouth twitches into a smile. His voice is slurred with impending sleep as he agrees. No more days. I think No More Days kind of summarizes everything pretty well. The villains of both stories are the pressures from relationship norms and the anxieties of failing them, alongside the stigma of just simply being with yourself. But also, Eddie himself is not in the right emotional condition to share his life with someone else, someone new, because he's not comfortable entirely yet, as he is. At least not until he embraces Venom, and it's in that embrace that he moves beyond the obligation of wanting to be in a relationship, or at least feeling sort of incomplete. The next story envisions this with a tighter emphasis on the human body and Jolly G. Willikers. Withdrawal has 3 chapters. The first, Surrender, features an Eddie more uncomfortable than the others with Venom in his life. He can't sleep like he used to either. He's been having dreams, not every night, but often enough, filled with swirling black tendrils and the feeling of safety. Echoed words in Venom's deep, all-encompassing voice. And guess what? Eddie almost gets with another man too, but he can't follow through with it. Eddie says he's in a relationship, and they're being watched right now to scare the guy off, but Venom actually wanted it. In the shower afterwards, Venom forces Eddie to use a lot of shampoo, if you know what I'm saying. Golly. One thing leads to another, and you get the picture. In chapter 2, Take From Me, Eddie can't get over what happened. He dreams of Venom over his body. He goes out for a drink, and guess what? Another man approaches Eddie, and instead of asking him to join the Avengers Initiative, he wants to initiate his rectum. Again, Eddie says he's in a relationship, and he's watching them. There's like a battle of control going on between Eddie and Venom. Back in the shower again, the same thing happens, and Venom uses his tongue for pharmaceutical purposes. In the final chapter, Open, Eddie sleeps, well, for the first time since Annie. Tendrils wrap around him. "Don't be afraid of us. We would never hurt you." No, not Venom. It's Eddie. With all his flaws and his mistakes, Eddie feels Venom's tongue tail hotly against his chest in denial of his thoughts. It's not Venom. Venom is perfect. Venom gives him everything he asks for, so gentle with him, so loving. It's Eddie, his buried insecurities that he supposes every human has. The one that surface when something gets too close. Eddie needs it. Venom doesn't need permission anymore. They have a good time. But he needs to go for work. But then things escalate, including the mattress being lifted up into the air. Colors cascade due to the amount of catharsis is released. "We love you, Eddie. You're everything to us. We want you to be happy." Eddie can only hold on. It's so awkward saying that and then just sort of sitting in my room and being like, okay then, moving on. The fear of not being accepted by your own body, the fear of failing social norms, and finding happiness with the self as it is, not as something incomplete, is what I got from these stories. There's also very clearly a strong gay subtext to it when it comes to it basically being also about the romance between 2 roommates who have previously unexpressed love for one another despite sharing such close, intimate space. But the self-love one was the one that stood out to me the most, speaking as someone who's clearly not the intended demographic when it comes to these stories. But either way, I think they're worthy of appreciating, seeing the amount of thought put into these stories, and seeing their popularity and how it impacted the films, which adopted similar interests by the second one. Furthermore, reading these stories also kind of made me realize that fictional branded characters have to a large extent become democratized, copyright issues aside of obviously. The discourse around the franchise is no longer as centralized as the old days. There's not only a whole industry here, but there's entire art communities that are legitimized by the consumers. So perhaps the symbiosis represented here within this essay isn't just the one in Eddie's anus, but the influencing new converging systems of authorship, where creative fans can have as much influence as the money people. I don't know, that was my attempt at trying to sound profound again.
Show me your soul. Baby, I'll show you mine. Show me your soul. Honey, it's way past time. How expensive do I have to be? Need I spell it out before you get it, baby?
Alright, so this was the Symbrock video, which should have come out ages ago, but I've been hooking up with a lot of people in bars. This was also supposed to be part of a new series called Digital Cultures, and there's a bunch of other stuff that I really want to get into, like the Science Bros, the Snyder Cut movement, Tobey Maguire memes, and all a bunch of other stuff. I have no idea if those videos are going to be made anyways, because I'm kind of completely restructuring the channel and everything. So this video stands on its own as a weird fever dream. And special thanks to everyone on Patreon.